Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, all the places at Hawk Blogger. And here we are, kind of in the middle stages of the offseason, in between the uncanny valley between the end of the Super Bowl and the beginning of the scouting combine. And there's no better person to talk to during this preparation period than Rob Staton of Seahawks Draft Blog. Rob, dude, it is great to have you back. How are you doing today?
Yeah, really good. Kind of ready for the combine, though, to be honest, Brian. Ready for that to sort of get along here now because like I said, we're just in that middle period between things getting really interesting when you're going to get sort of that contract information. You're going to get the combine. You're going to get free agency. And then you have that long, boring bit between that and then the draft. So we're in one of those little boring bits now. So bring on the draft, bring on the combine.
I got to say, I'm loving that sweatshirt, man. Where'd you get that sweatshirt?
So I got this from what's it called?
Simply Seattle.
Yeah. So when I was in Seattle for the in 2023, I basically went in there and bought about 17 things. So it's pretty good. And then over here, you kind of have a lot of access now to merchandise. So a lot of the things that I get over here that people go, oh, I like your hat or I like your hoodie or something like that. You can get a lot of good Seahawks merch over here these days. So it's pretty good. But Simply Seattle and around Lumen Field, the stores around Lumen Field tend to have things that you can't find anywhere else. So
yeah, Simply Seattle's very solid for sure. I guess I'm kind of curious. You know, I know you put up on Seahawks Draft Blog your offseason plan. You've been talking about fixing the offensive line. Where's your focus right now? Like where has your attention at this point during the offseason?
I think my attention at the minute is trying to find out a little bit more about this offense and the sort of the schemes that Kubiak's going to do, and then trying to pair the players with that. So when they come out and speak so openly about wanting to be a zone blocking team and the importance of the center position, for example, I think, okay, let's go and find out who the better zone blockers are in free agency. So for the last 2 days, I've been working out the zone blocking grades for every single free agent offensive lineman last season, the season before, turning that into an average, because you can have, for example, Evan Neal had like a 90.9 zone blocking grade last season. So you think, wow, what an option he would be. And then you look and it's like on 20 snaps. Yeah. And the year before, he was like a 50 grade. So I think balancing it out a little bit and then trying to find an average, but then also being aware that some players play a lot of snaps, some play very few, and then trying to work out who those guys are that could potentially be good options for the Seahawks. And then the other thing is then sort of looking at the defensive players, trying to work out, who are the best when you look at pressures and pass rush win percentage. I've done a lot of research on that in the last few days. And then with the quarterbacks, there's so much quarterback data out there. I don't know what is the best thing to look at, frankly, but you can look at things such as big time throws under pressure under 2 seconds. You can look at big turnovers in the same situations, and you can say, okay, well, this quarterback's really good. This quarterback's really good in that situation. And sort of looking at those different scenarios and trying to think, what is it the Seahawks really want? And it's funny because you can look at that data, Brian, and find 2 or 3 players who you think, wow, that makes them a really good option for this scheme or for the Seahawks in this situation. But then you look at 3 other segments of data, and those players will be towards the bottom of that. And actually looking through all of it, if you were going to pick anybody perhaps to work best in the Kubiak system, it'd be Rourke, the quarterback from Indiana. But he's got an ACL and he's probably going to be a very late round pick, and the chances of him becoming a franchise quarterback are very low. But when you actually look at all that data, you think, well, he's somebody that maybe we should pay more attention to if they're fully into Kubiak. So there's a lot to get at, and trying to work out what's a red herring and what's actual is quite interesting.
I wonder if you had the same reaction I did listening to the Clint Kubiak press conference. There's probably a lot of reactions to have, but one of them was, it was a little refreshing to me that when I asked him about using a fullback, he was like, yeah, I like running 12 and 21. Like, he knew exactly, like, he wasn't hiding anything. There was no, yeah, we do everything in this offense. He was like, this is what we like. Someone asked him later about it. He's like, yes, so we'll be using a fullback. There are some people that are saying, oh, maybe he's gonna adjust his philosophy to his personnel. And he talks about that a lot, but basically he's like, this is what we are, and then we'll kind of adjust at the edges to what we have in the building. But Did you find that refreshing as I did compared to what we've talked about in the past few years? Even like back to Shane Waldron, you didn't really know what he was as a play caller, but Clint Kubiak, I think, knows exactly who he is.
No, I absolutely, completely agree with you. And I'm ready to sort of see the Seahawks have a vision. I'm ready for Kubiak to be consistent. The thing with Waldron is, I always think back to that opening game. I can't remember what season it was in Indianapolis, where the Seahawks played a certain way, moved the ball extremely well. I think we all got excited watching that. And then the following week, they played the Tennessee Titans and got run all over, and the play calling was really, really different. And you're thinking, well, where was last week's game plan? And it would only ever happen in fits and starts. And if, having complete clarity on what they want to do under Clint Kubiak could be the best thing that the Seahawks have. And in particular, we obviously the offensive line isn't very good, but if you know what kind of running plays you want to run, what play action plays you want to run, what your protections are, you actually sign and draft players to work to a system. It does feel a little bit over the last few years, they haven't drafted for gap scheme or zone scheme. It's been like, who are the best players that we grade? And then you end up with sort of big, explosive, tough, like an Anthony Bradford. But then you also have, you put it in Austin Blythe at center. And you're thinking, well, okay, can we just connect everything? If you're going to be a zone blocking team, like you can go in this draft and you could find about 10 really good graded who look like, you watch them on tape and you think that's a zone blocking guard. Well, if they can start drafting players like that for this scheme, as opposed to just, well, this guy grades out, he's probably a big 330-pound gap scheme blocker, but we're going to draft him anyway because we like him. If you draft him for the scheme and you know exactly what you want to be, that should help this team.
Yeah, I remember back when Mike Holmgren was the coach, and the offense with Mike Holmgren, I wouldn't call it particularly creative. I wouldn't call it where, it was guys that were, and I wouldn't necessarily even say that you had these explosive receivers that were just open all the time. Darrell Jackson and, not Ricardo Lockett, DJ Hackett. Sorry, I get those two mixed up sometimes. But it was very much a offense where they knew who they were. They would run to one side. They would bootleg off of that. There was a lot of floods to the other side. I remember seeing the tight ends, in the flat. I remember seeing Joe Jaravicius, come across. Like, they would take their shots and they kind of knew what they were, and it was all stitched together. And so I think a lot of folks, myself included, you get excited about a guy like Grant Udinsky or someone new that would have a new perspective and maybe have a new wrinkle. But if you really think about it, like 90 to 95% of good NFL offenses are not wrinkles. They are simply well executed plays called at the right time by a seasoned coordinator. And, I don't think anyone's going to get like over the moon excited about Clint Kubiak. I don't think that's who he is as a personality. I don't think that's who he is as a play caller, at least at this point. But I think the chance that you're going to have a offense that you're not going to be pulling your hair out saying, why on earth have we not gotten the ball to Ken Walker? Why on earth have we never moved Geno Smith out of the pocket? Why on earth is every play a 7-step drop behind this offensive line for the 45th drop back in a game? Like, I think some of those just egregious like errors and aggravations, I think those maybe will be in our rearview mirror.
And there's going to be no learning curve for Clint Kubiak. I know he's not been a seasoned play caller. He's only really done it for a year, but he's been around the game forever. He's like a man and boy type thing going on here with he's grown up in the game, and he's probably spoken to his dad after every game that the two of them have coached. Why did you do that, Dad? What did you think about when I called this in New Orleans, Dad? And there's to have that resource, to have a Super Bowl winning offensive minded head coach as your dad is a resource. He's obviously hoping to bring back Rick Dennison to work with him, which greatly experienced. John Benson, very, very experienced. I just like it. I like the staff that they're building. It just fills you with confidence. Like you say, it's not the kind of staff that's going to get you excited. But then again, I was excited about Shane Waldron's hire. Sometimes it's not about being that excited. It's like, whoa, you've got the next great Sean McVay coach. And then you realize, well, not quite as good as that. And with this guy, the other thing I think if you're going to be successful as a coach, I think you have to be prepared to grind and to sort of work those horrendous hours and to go through it. And with him, because he's grown up around that, and I think he's probably ambitious and wants to be a head coach like his dad was, he's probably going to do whatever it takes to succeed. And I'm not saying that Grubb and Waldron didn't do that, but I'm very confident that he is going to do whatever it takes to be a success. And he kind of needs it now. He's been in a number of different stops. He needs this to work in Seattle. And I'm confident about it. I'm confident. I think it's as good a hire as they could have made given the circumstances. And now I just want to see how they're going to piece this together. Now it's over to, the decision makers in personnel to have a good free agency. We've not had a good free agency in Seattle for too long. So the pro personnel guys have to do a better job. John Schneider has to do a better job. And then when it gets to the draft, if you have a good free agency, you can go into that to take the best players who are there, as opposed to having to fill needs. And you will always have a better draft if you fill most of your needs, preferably all of the significant needs, in free agency first.
Yeah. We'll definitely talk about that in a little bit. Obviously, John Schneider had his first of the Seattle Sports Radio appearances a couple days ago. I talked about that yesterday with our mutual friend, Jeff Simmons. What did you make of that appearance? Anything stand out to you?
I think the thing that stood out to me, and again, this is not to hammer anybody, I think I would have liked to have heard just some basic questions asked that weren't. I'm guessing they've had a steer not to ask about Geno Smith, which I suppose is understandable. It's the flagship radio show. But it would have been nice to have an update on what is the latest there. And even if you said, look, I can't talk about anything, at least it gets asked. There's certain expectations you have as a fan as to what is going to get asked in an interview like this. And to sort of skirt around it and to ask for the first opening gambit to be, do you have any time off? Felt a little bit like that's not really a question I think anybody really cares about right now. There were some other questions as well that maybe could have gone into. But, look, he acknowledged as much as he was ever going to that the offensive line is a requirement to improve upon. He's not going to give any firm details on their plans to do that. And I wouldn't want him to either, because there's 31 other teams who would be made very aware if he said anything like that. Pro Football Talk did an article within about 7 hours of him doing that interview. If he says we're going to draft and sign free agents, it'll be written up by Florio or whoever straight away. So he's not going to give any plans away. Actually, Brian, I don't need to hear anything from him. I just want to see actions now. I just want to get into free agency and I want to see something better. That doesn't necessarily mean spending $30 million on Trey Smith. It just means doing something that when it comes to the season, we're not going like we were 12 months ago. Everything looks great except the offensive line, and having to sign centers in August because the position still needs something else. And that center then retiring after week 8. I just want to see a plan that is better than 3 weeks into free agency. Who's left? Laken Tomlinson will do. That's not going to do it for me this year.
I think you're not alone there. We're talking to Rob Staton of the Seahawks Draft Blog, and I have a couple of reactions there. I mean, one, I have to admit, when I've been doing the same thing you're doing, looking at zone blocking players both in the NFL and in college. And one of the best zone blocking centers in the NFL last year was Connor Williams. So it would have been nice. Who knows? I mean, if Clint Kubiak had been the OC, not that he was an option really last year, but if he had been there, maybe Connor Williams wouldn't have retired. Maybe it would have been a perfect fit. Who knows? But the other thing I kind of think about, Rob, is it'll always come back to John Schneider. And we're going to, obviously we're going to assess those decisions as everybody should. When I sit back and I look at it, I'm like, who do the Seahawks have on their team that other teams fear? That like when they go up against them, they're like, man, we're not going to really be able to handle this guy, but we're gonna put in something to mitigate them or reduce their impact on the game. The only guy that really comes to mind for me, Leonard Williams became that last year, I think, as a guy that was really a problem every week. And I think DK Metcalf, despite the fact that I think a lot of folks have frustration with the amount of impact he has, I think teams account for him each and every week. I don't know if there's anybody else. Even Charles Cross, who is, I think, a really good young tackle, I don't think that other teams are like, man, we don't know how we're going to, he's just going to overpower us each week. He's just going to dominate us. And so when I look at the draft, when I look at free agency, I'm almost just like, don't talk to me about good enough guys. I want to see them add players that have the potential even to be dominant physical players. And that can be speed, it can be speed, it can be physical, like any number of attributes. But I don't want, like, this is why I am not a Ibuka guy as a receiver. Like, going to be a great number 2. He's not going to be a dominant player. Like, so no. I'm curious, like, have you know, you and I have talked about this in the past. I'm curious if you have a similar perspective and if there's folks that are on your list that kind of meet that bar.
Without a doubt, they need more special players. And, you know, this is a point that Jeff makes quite often, is that, you know, Seattle's roster is, I think he said it when he was speaking to you recently, like 10 to 40 or something like that is pretty good. And then there's it's sort of the top 10 that is lacking that star quality. Very hard to get that star quality, though, unless you're kind of looking. One, you need a bit of luck in the draft. And 2, you have to maybe find that major high upside guy that's flawed round 3, round 4. Oh, suddenly it's Max Crosby. So you need to sort of have a bit of fortune with that as well. And I would like to see them be aggressive over the next couple of years if opportunities emerge. You know, Myles Garrett's the obvious one at the moment. If Max Crosby becomes available, if Micah Parsons becomes available, I think you have to consider it. Any chance you get to add one of the best players in the NFL, you have to take it. I have to say that, Brian, I was more encouraged from a Seahawks perspective after the Super Bowl than I was before. Because going into the Super Bowl, I thought, well, if Mahomes just wins again, what this is going to tell me is you need an exceptional quarterback to ever beat this guy. Like, you're going to have Joe Burrow or somebody to be able to knock Patrick Mahomes off the perch. And then when I'm watching the Eagles and I'm running through the roster, clearly the Eagles have got a fantastic roster. But I did think, you know, if you just rewind 12 months ago, you now look at their roster and you think, okay, so A.J. Brown's very good. He's better than DK Metcalf. I don't think there's a massive difference between the two. Devonta Smith and Jackson Smith and Jigba, I don't think there's a massive difference. Saquon's better than Ken Walker, but Ken Walker can be a very explosive running back in the right system. Jalen Hurts had an excellent playoff campaign. I don't think he's an elite quarterback. I don't think there's a massive difference between him and Geno Smith and several other quarterbacks in the NFL. And then defensively, they don't have a Myles Garrett. You know, they have a bunch of players who I'd say a bit like Boya Mafe and Derek Hall. They have, obviously, Jalen Carter is a force of nature. Leonard Williams played very well last season. And then, you know, you've got Byron Murphy, Milton Williams. You know, there's players in there. Jan Reed had a decent year if he comes back. At cornerback, you've got Devin Witherspoon. I don't think they've got a cornerback as good as Devin Witherspoon is. I don't, you know, Cooper DeJean is obviously fantastic. We don't have that kind of a player in Seattle. Maybe we'll get one in this draft because there is a player quite a lot like him. But at the back end, you've got Julian Love, and I don't think they have anybody like that. So I don't actually think there's a huge difference between the big difference between the two teams is Lane Johnson, Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, Mekhi Becton, the Australian left tackle whose name I keep forgetting.
Jordan Mailata.
That's the big difference.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if the Seahawks are looking at this and going, do you know what? We aren't a million miles away, as weird as that sounds, if you can put together an offensive line. But that has been 15 years of a problem for the Seahawks.
Yeah. I love that and had a similar kind of takeaway. And if you really look at that, like what won that game, I wish it was the Seahawks. It was the Eagles defense. That was a defense. And you said Jalen Hurts had a good playoff. And I would say Jalen Hurts had a good Super Bowl. Yes. And maybe a good conference championship. There was like the first couple of playoff games, he was, 40 yards passing. I mean, he wasn't great. So, but like, if you just really focus on, it wasn't just the Eagles defense. I would say it was their front four really won that game. And then a little bit of their cover corners. And to your point, Rob, I don't think there's a big difference between the Seahawks cover corners and the Eagles cover corners. Like, I just don't think if you ask 32 GMs, you could pick one or the other, same price, which would you rather have? I don't think that it would be 100% would pick the Eagles corners. But you look at the front four defensively, how close this team could be to having that kind of front four. Boya Mafe and Derek Hall started out last season like shot out of a cannon. Both of them suffered some injuries and just didn't sustain. Are either of those guys significantly worse than Josh Sweat? Like, I don't think so. I don't think so. And I think Byron Murphy is ascending in a way that I think he's going to have a much bigger impact in year 2 and year 3 than he had in year 1. And then we look at this draft. And man, this is where I'm curious. Like, I've been kind of pounding away on Jeff on this as well because we all have different instincts. Everyone's like, you got to draft an offensive lineman in the first round. I'm like, maybe. If you can get a defensive lineman that is is a much better prospect than the offensive lineman that falls to you, and you draft an offensive lineman at pick 50, I'm not sure that's the worst move here in terms of making this team closer to being dominant in the front four. I'm kind of curious where you're at on that.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I agree with everything that you've said and Jeff has said about making a strength even strong. Having something that is dominant, having something that other teams crave. I don't think you can necessarily just sort of balance your way to a championship. You do have to be great somewhere, whether that is quarterback, whether that is offensive line, preferably both, or it is an elite defense. But I think that showed that Super Bowl, those playoffs showed that an elite defense can still lead you to a title. And that is the best way for the Seahawks to become an elite defense now. It is to have somebody who can just game to game wreck things up front. And it's, there are players in this draft that I think that you could imagine becoming that. I think they're probably going to be out of range. The Abdul Carters, you can see that. And then I think there's a whole bunch of players who have got potential. And it stands to reason that of the 6 or 7 that have got real upside, 1 or 2 of them could become really, really, really special players in the way that Abdul Carter's got that potential. You've got to try and find out which one it is. And that's the hard part, because the Eagles, as good as the Eagles have been, took Jalen Reagor 1 pick before Justin Jefferson. That was a Howie Roseman decision. That's how hard it is to work out, okay, we've got these 3-4 players. We have a need at this position. Which one's going to be great? And even Howie Roseman got it epically wrong. So, sometimes you've just got to have a bit of luck with that. But there are players in this class. There's definitely defenders and defensive linemen in this class. Even some that are perhaps not as talked about as some of the others who have got the potential to be really, really good players at the next level.
Who would you put in that list on the defensive side? Let me put it this way. I know how big of a fan you are of Tyler Booker. And one of the things that's, I've definitely come around on Tyler Booker the more I've learned about him. I was a little concerned about his size and translation to the NFL and on and on. But one of the things that really stands out to me about Tyler Booker is Mike Macdonald has said over and over and over again, I want guys that love football. I want guys that are going to be grinding away with me day in, day out. Tyler Booker's that kind of player. Like, he loves football. And so he's absolutely a Mike Macdonald kind of guy. So absolutely could see him available potentially at 18. Tell me which defensive linemen, could be edges, could be tackles, that if they were available, you would not punch a wall if they announced those defensive linemen instead of Tyler Booker at 18. And I'm not going to don't give you Abdul Carter. Give me guys that are maybe like eight and below, like those kind of level of guys.
Well, the players that have interested me the most might even be available more in round 2 if you trade down. But these are the players that have caught my eye the most. I think just have that little bit of something that could be special. So Darius Alexander's the first one. Watching how he performed at the Senior Bowl. Now, on tape, I have to acknowledge, sometimes the tape, he's lingering on blocks a bit too much. You just want to see a bit more fire that you did see at the Senior Bowl that you don't see down at Toledo. But when the flashes happen, they're really impressive. When you watched him at the Senior Bowl, and I messaged Jeff straight away when I was watching him, was like, this guy looks like Chris Jones. He's 6'4", he's about 305 pounds. He's kind of got the same body, 34-inch arms. And there was one rep where he beat Josh Connolly off the edge as an edge rusher and bent the arm and got straight into the quarterback. I'm thinking at 304 pounds, if you can beat a guy who's going to go in the top 40 at left tackle, that's special. So Darius Alexander might be one of those players who goes 40th, 45th overall or whatever in this draft. Chris Jones was like the 35th overall pick. And in 5 years' time, you wonder, how the hell did he last that long? So someone like Darius Alexander could be a real difference maker. Now, you're probably not going to take him at 18, but maybe you could trade down. I don't know how keen teams will be to trade up, but if you did, maybe he's somebody you have a look at there. Braden Swinson at LSU. No one really talks about Braden Swinson. If you're talking about pure ability to rush the edge with speed, straight and around the arc, he's somebody who is massively underrated. So the top 3 players for pressures in college football last year, Abdul Carter was number 1, Jack Sawyer was number 2, and a lot of Jack Sawyer's production came in the playoffs. In the regular season, it was poor, and then he exploded in the playoffs. And then third's Braden Swinson. So that's ahead of Mike Green. He had 1 more pressure than Mike Green. That's more than James Pierce. That's more than Kyle Kennard, Nick Scott, and Landon Jackson, all these players. He's very, very interesting. I've been grading him in round 2 for a while now, and I just think he's somebody that people are sleeping on who might actually be better than a lot of these edge rushers. And then there's another 2 actually. There's Ty Robinson, who I interviewed not that long ago. Now, Ty Robinson had a very average first 2 days at the Senior Bowl, and then on the 3rd day was unbelievable. I know that Scott McLuhan loves him because Jim Nagy let that slip in a podcast, because Scott's been doing some work for the Senior Bowl. And I think he's going to test a lot better than people realize at the Combine. He had 7 sacks last season, was the 2nd most amongst interior defensive linemen. He reminds me a little bit of Justin Smith, who played for the 49ers. And I think just having that kind of a player on this defense to tie down the edge, to do what Draymond Jones didn't really do, could be important. And then the final player I'd mention is Savion Jones, who's a player that I've been studying over the last week. Now, again, somebody who was at his best at the Senior Bowl, was electric, had a few bad reps in 1v1s. The game itself, he had 2 unbelievable plays very early on. He's a 3-sport athlete. He is great length, great size. People talk about Shamar Stewart, people like that who are Jared Ivey, these bigger guys who are 6'5", 280, 290. That's Savion Jones. He's exactly in that ballpark. Plays with his hair on fire. Like the game against USC, it was the game of his life. Like his life depended on that game in week 1 last season. Just a really interesting player who can do a bit of everything, Brian. Rush from the inside, rush from the edge. And if you have that kind of a player who can blow up a game from either inside or out, that's priceless, really. So I think these are players that people aren't really talking about who could be better than some of the bigger names. The Prince Umana or how we pronounce that, James Pierce, the 2 Ohio State guys. I think these guys could be better than those players.
What do you think about Michael Williams?
Well, the first Texas game, he was unstoppable. Had a great game, made the left tackle look average. Everybody beats the right tackle, but just moved around the line and was really impactful. Jalen Walker had a great game as well in that one. But then he disappears, and then he's injured again. And then you're thinking, okay, you went into the year and everyone's thinking this guy could be first overall, top 5, top 10. And he just never really put that consistency together. He still had 26 pressures, even though he missed a load of time, which is, about as much as Jordan Birch had playing a full season. So there's definitely something there. But he's one of them, he could last to 18 because of the injuries, because of the inconsistency. And you might take him and you might end up with Dion Jordan, underwhelming, not really hard, not really in it. Mm-hmm. Or you could end up with Jared Verse. How did he last to number 17? Oh, this guy was meant to be amazing, meant to be top 10. And then for some reason, the league's talked themselves out of it. And now he goes 17, 18, and he's amazing. So there's definitely a possibility of that. And he's, for his size, do you not think he's big, but he looks lean, doesn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, he's the guy that I haven't fully come to my perspective on yet, and most people have him going top 10, top 12. He's a guy that I think could end up falling down, because I think there's guys that are going to make jumps at the Combine that people may not. I'm not sure he's going to be one of them. We'll find out. But, I like Mike Green. For me, I don't think he's a great fit for what the Seahawks run. I think he's a little too light, a little too small. What I saw at the Senior Bowl is a guy that excels at rushing from the left side of the line against the right tackle. Did not succeed almost in any of his rushes going against left tackles in the Senior Bowl. Doesn't mean he's not capable of it. But
did he make you dizzy trying that same spin move over and over again?
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be a good player. I have some questions about how he'll hold up in the run game, but Mike Green's kind of not off my board, but I'm not thinking about him in 18. There's other guys like Kenneth Grant's a guy I'm really just not sure where I feel athletically for his size. If he becomes what he could be, I'm not sure there's a better pick you could make at 18 to pair with Byron Murphy for the next 5-7 years. but there's a lot of questions about whether he's going to become anything more than a 340-pound nose tackle. You know, like
Did you think he needed a rocket up his arse when you watched him?
um, sometimes.
I wanted to see him like, come on, man, you're playing against the Mason Graham. That's between the two of you. Come on, let's see some games
Yeah,
wrecked here.
yeah. I definitely saw more from Mason Graham than I did from him. And there's no wonder there's separation in terms of where people have him on the board. But I don't know. I've seen a lot of 340-pound guys that don't have his motor. So like I thought he was okay in that regard. But there's other guys in that range that in this draft class that have pretty decent motors as well. I went into Senior Bowl really curious about Deion Walker, and I left feeling like, oh man, I just think his pad level's not. It's going to be a project to get him to be what you want him to be. I think he probably lost at least a round, maybe 2 rounds in the Senior Bowl. But then there's other guys that I don't know, man. I love what I saw from Jamari Caldwell at 340 pounds. You might be able to get him in the 4th round, maybe the 5th. Who knows where he'll go? So I don't know. That's kind of like the right now we're in the mode of who are the guys that if they called their name realistically could be available that you'd be thrilled about. I've got a few. I'm curious who's on your list.
Well, on my list in terms of who would I be thrilled
At 18.
At 18, I think Tyler Booker's got the best tape of any guard since Quentin Nelson. So, but I don't think he's going to be there. I think he's going to be off the board before 18. But I would be thrilled with him. Do you mean thrilled or just sort of like, yeah, I can live with that? What are we talking about?
Like guys here? That you'd be pretty excited about. Like probably no more than 5 names, I would guess, would be on this list of guys. You're like, man, if these guys are here, I'd be thrilled.
Do you know what? It's quite hard because it's not really a draft where there's that many. The guys who I would be thrilled to see, are the guys who are going to be gone. I would be of the names who are likely to be there. I would say Booker, Jalen Walker, and Jahdae Barron.
Talk about those last 2. We haven't talked as much about Walker and Barron.
Walker, unbelievable first half of the season, then went quiet. Very similar to Malachi Starks. Went very, very quiet in the second half of the season, but then at the end of the year, had a good final game against Texas. And then, okay, here we go again. He's just somebody who it's always hard to sort of think, well, that guy could be Micah Parsons. And everybody kind of hopes that Abdul Carter is going to be that. But Walker, at times during the season, looked better than Abdul Carter. It's just in the second half of the season, Carter suddenly went, I'm going to go to the next level here and looked like the best player in college football for a while. And Walker, regressed in that point. And it was like, okay, Carter's the better player. But I'd say mid-season, I had Walker ahead of Carter on my board. And I think a few people were wondering the same thing. And I think that sort of disappointing second half of the season, he's not played a lot of football, could leave him to last a little while, but he's somebody who could play linebacker. He then goes up to the line of scrimmage in certain passing situations. Creative defensive teams are going to have a great time with him. I think his ability, his explosion, his quickness off the line, you can line him up inside. He can blitz very, very well. He's unbelievable leadership. People are talking about Tyler Booker's character at the moment. Jalen Walker is said to be that in the Georgia defense. Like, he's an unbelievable, respected leader, very mature, very passionate. And then with Jahdae Barron, I think if anybody's going to be Cooper DeJean in this draft, it's going to be Jahdae Barron. It's that ability to sort of play pretty much anywhere in the secondary. I think his best position is going to be in that kind of star range. But his run defense, his ability to come up and hit in the run, very impressive. His coverage, excellent. Again, halfway through the season, it seemed like the ball was just constantly going into his hands and that he was making a play on the ball to the point that offenses then just went away from him. They were kind of looking where he was, and Makuba, the other safety, got a lot of the action because they were just avoiding Barron. And again, very mature. Just listening to the guy speak makes me think the Seahawks can be high on this guy because it's just everything about him is that's the kind of player they've been drafting. And it's just got that little bit of special glow and quality to him. So if they want to add somebody who can be what Cooper DeJean has been for the Eagles, I think Jahdae Barron is the closest to it.
Great names there. On my list now, I guess Probably a little bit lower in most people's, total top 50. But I would put Armand Membu in that list. If he's available. Right now I've got him at right right up there as like tackle 1, 2, 3, somewhere in that range. And I think he could end up being guard 1 in this class. And so he's different. I've talked about it before. He's different than a guy like Jonas Savanaia, who, I was really excited forward to seeing at the Senior Bowl, and he played right tackle exclusively. He's got all the measurables of a tackle. He's not a tackle. He cannot hold up out there. He cannot pass protect. He could be a good guard. I think he's still a project. I think he's got some sloppiness to his game. So he like dropped a bit for me.
No aggression. Membu's so aggressive.
Membu is just...
Savanaia is not. He's so passive.
Yeah. I really like Savanaia as everything about who he is, I think is going to translate to be a good guard eventually. But I agree. Like, Membu just jumps off. Like, I didn't even know him that well until I started watching over and over. And I was like, this guy's going to be special. There's a chance he's available. There's a chance.
Yeah, there is.
I think there's a chance that Kelvin Banks is available as a guard. And I think I love his run blocking tape, Rob. Like, that's the type of guy that when he's moving, he is terrorizing other people. That's the kind of guy I could get excited about. And then the other guy that I keep bringing up, and there's all the reasons why he could be available, the reasons why people be hesitant, is Shamar Stewart. I think that if he's available, I think there's a chance he could be available. I think there's a chance he could go in the top 10. I think he's going to have an excellent combine. I think that he's going to keep moving up the boards. But he's a guy that has a ceiling that is so much beyond what his production was, that the only reason you have a chance at him is because he had such low production. If he had even moderate production, his traits put him top 10 for sure. So that's another guy that, like, again, you're not in the first class section. You're in pick 18. Those are some guys that, for me, I'd be pretty excited if they end up being the name that's called.
Did you hear Tom McShay talk about Shamar Stewart? I thought that was really interesting the other day, where he was saying that a lot of teams they do view him like, wow, look at the body. Obviously had a very good Senior Bowl when he was rushing there. And then there's a few that think, but there's quite a few players like this who are I've been calling him like a classic nearly man, in that there are so many plays on tape where he almost makes the play. And then you watch in Texas A&M and you think, he's not on the field anymore. Like, they're spelling him for this series, and you get him out there. Let's sort of see him, and that worries me a little bit. But you just have to look at the guy. He's a get off the bus type of player. Do you know what with the offensive lineman? Any of those three guys, I would not complain about them at 18. For what we know now on February the 16th, the thing about Membu, Banks, and even Booker to an extent is that the deeper you search down these guards, I've actually started, and maybe this is a foolish thing to do, Brian, I've started liking the guards in sort of round 3, 4, and 5 a bit more than the guards who I've seen in the first round. So that I can, Membu, great, fantastic. But I'm almost starting to think now, I can maybe get Jade Barron at 18, and then I can get, there's so many of these classic zone, and you watch them.
Yeah, who are those guys? Who are those guys that you're starting to fall in love with? So
Clay Webb, who is at Jacksonville State, was at Georgia. Now, his backstory is a little bit weird. I'm not going to talk about it here because it's a family show. But there was a little bit of a prank that went wrong, I think, is the best way to describe it. And he's ended up at Jacksonville State, 5-star recruit, has unbelievable wrestling background and everything that the Seahawks are interested in. And then you sort of see the zone blocking grades 84.9. So you think, okay, so he's got the grade, but let's go and watch the tape. And then you watch the tape and you think, this is exactly what the Seahawks, system, he's a classic zone blocker. He's the kind of player that you can imagine at the very best, the Shanahan system, that kind of Alex Gibbs type offensive lineman. He's got everything that you need for that. So you watch and you think, I'd happily take this guy. If he's available 2-3 rounds later, you can give him round 3, round 4, whatever it is, round 5, then I'm very interested in that. Then you've got Connor Colby at Iowa. Connor Colby's such a fantastic zone blocking guard. Again, just gets to the second level very easily. The classic ability to, I'm going to block my guy. The running play is going to go here. I'm just going to run through the next defender that I see and just shove him out of the way. And he does that consistently well. Now, our offensive line is very exciting to watch from a zone blocking system. It's a shame that the right tackle and the center have both said they're going to return to school, because you could basically just draft the Iowa offensive line to come and play for the Seahawks under Clint Kubiak. Luke Kandra, I don't know if you've watched this guy at Cincinnati. I only watched him in the last couple of days. I mean, look, there's the body itself. I mean, he is unbelievable shape. Again, very athletic, expected to test very well. 76.5 zone blocking grade. You watch him, you think, okay, whether it's a center, whether it's at guard, this guy can play, gets to the second level very well, brilliant in space. I would recommend a lot of people go and check out Luke Kandra at Cincinnati. He's their right guard, a very exciting player to go and watch. So these players, everybody knows who Gray Zabel is. You've got Jack Nelson, who's the left tackle at Wisconsin, who I've liked for a long, long time. I think he's been underrated. I don't really know what people need to see from Jack Nelson to consider him more than just a late round pick, because I think he did a very solid job for Wisconsin. He just doesn't get beat off the edge. I think you can kick him outside. I think worst case scenario is David Edwards, who's playing for the Bills these days, I think was with the Rams. And, there's a whole bunch of players like that who are pretty good. And there's even one or two centers in here. I think that you can utilize a Drew Kendall in a zone blocking scheme. I think you can utilize Jonah Monheim in a zone blocking scheme. You're not going to watch them and be blown away on the tape, but they're the kind of players that Drew Dorman was when he was coming into the league, which is why Drew Dorman went where he did instead of round 1 or round 2. So there are a whole bunch of linemen in this draft who are interesting for this scheme. And for that reason, it makes me think maybe you can just go and get 2 or 3 of these guys and draft a different position at number 18. Preferably after signing some veteran offensive linemen first.
What do you think about Jared Wilson at center? He had one of the top zone blocking grades and is a physical, a specimen as well. Yeah. What's your thought there?
Well, I immediately liked him because he grew up playing soccer. So as an Englishman, I have to enjoy that aspect of his play. And he puts down a lot of his athleticism down to that strangely. I don't know many 300-pound soccer players. And then I thought he was excellent on tape. I think he's somebody who, if you listen to him, I must admit, he's very softly spoken, very sort of, it almost seems like a little bit of a child in a man's body almost. And part of me does just want an angry, aggressive, horrible bastard of a center or a guard to go and play for this team now. So I do wonder if he's just a little bit too nice sometimes. And maybe he's a little green, maybe somebody you draft to develop rather than draft to sort of play immediately. But he has all of the physical tools, as you mentioned. He's got a great zone blocking grade. He's somebody who I think is very, very interesting. 78.9 is his blocking grade. So I think he's a very interesting player. And if you could get him round 3, round 4, not feeling like you've got to take him too early, get him in there, develop him behind. Let's say they have to settle for Ryan Kelly or somebody like that, settle for Ryan Kelly. Would have all taken Ryan Kelly over the last 5 years. But let's just say they sign Ryan Kelly, who's probably got a year or 2 left in the tank. And then you go and draft Jared Wilson as this is our Cam Jurgens for the Jason Kelsey type thing. That's a plan that makes sense. It's the kind of plan the Seahawks have not had at any point in the last decade.
Yeah. I've done some weird things, Rob. We're talking to Rob Staton of the Seahawks Draft Blog, where I just only take defensive linemen and offensive linemen through the whole draft. And I got to say, I don't hate the outcome.
No,
I don't hate the outcome. There's people that, you share your drafts and these things. And you're like, well, you didn't get this position. You didn't get that position. We have needs here. I think that a lot of teams, if what they did is they simply drew from the strength of the draft, whatever it was that year, receiver, tight end, now some exceptions to this, but if they just did that, they would do a lot better than really prioritizing need. And so this year, the strengths of this class, I guess you agree, defensive line, running back, tight end, and then I would say interior offensive line is pretty good as well. And so if you just pulled from there, you'd be in pretty good shape. And there's one guy that I'm really curious your thoughts. I admit I've come to have a draft crush on this guy. I don't even know how to pronounce his name properly. JJ Pegues.
Oh yeah, the Ole Miss guy,
from Ole Miss. 6'2", 325 pounds, started as a tight end, went to defensive tackle, and now has started playing fullback as well. And I've watched his film. He had 7 rushing touchdowns last year at 325. And the guy's got feet. He's got nimble feet, man. I've seen him make cuts and I've seen him run over people. And I'm like, okay, yes, please. I'll take that. I'll take the 325-pound fullback. Tell me what you think about him.
So the lasting impression I have about him is there was a game, I think it was against Florida, where Lane Kiffin, I think, fell so in love with the running ability, like you were just saying there, that he used him too much. And they had him like running outside zone. They had him like running out to the edge. And he was getting stopped on 4th and 1. And the commentators were going, why are they running him on that kind of a running play? Like, if you're going to put him in there, have him run forwards. And I think he missed like 2 short yardage runs because they were trying to get him to do crazy things for his size. But look, if you watched them, I didn't watch every Ole Miss game, but I watched most of them mainly just because I feel like you have to watch all the quarterback games to sort of get a feel for them. So I watched all the Jackson Dart games, and you would see him come out so many times. I've never seen a defensive tackle come out as often as he did to do it. And there were some really good runs there. And there is, look, he's obviously a great athlete. There was one game where he left the game and he was a noticeable, he's not there anymore. It might have been the Georgia game for a while that he was out for. And then he came back in and it was, okay, he's back to anchor the line. And he's a very interesting player. Now, whether or not he can do some of this running stuff at the next level remains to be seen. But he was a fun player to watch. And he's a good defensive tackle. I mean, that's the thing. If you're talking about sort of a cheap nose tackle that you get early day 3, then he's definitely somebody who can do that.
Another name, and then I'm going to do some super chats. I'll let you go. So we know Taysom Hill's a guy that Clint Kubiak already mentioned in press conference. I asked him about how they were effective in short yardage. He talked about having a weapon there. And maybe Taysom Hill comes over. He's also 35 years old and coming off a serious injury. There's a tight end named Jalen Conyers. I don't know if you've looked at Jalen Conyers at all, but
I've seen him do the running plays. Yeah.
He is a wildcat tight end. He was a quarterback in high school for a couple of years. He's 6'3", 263 pounds. And I mean, people have asked, like, who's the next Taysom Hill? And I'm like, Taysom Hill's Taysom Hill. Like, he's like kind of a 101. There's not a lot of people that have kind of his mixture of skills. I don't know if you've gotten many chances to look at Jalen Conyers, but I'm wondering if maybe he's a late round guy that they take a flyer on to become kind of that short yardage weapon.
He's not somebody that I've stood enough to give a grade to, but I've seen the plays that you're talking about. And given what he has spoken about and sort of what they want to do, I'd be very surprised if they don't look for somebody like that. If it is Taysom Hill coming over, I was actually having a look for the over the cap for the Saints yesterday to actually see who they could maybe, if there's anybody that it would make sense for the Saints to be willing to part with. And their cap situation is so bad that it's hard to think, how are they going to get out of this mess? And Taysom Hill was one of the players that they could potentially get out of, but there was none of the others. But I suspect he will be available, and that will be interesting if he's healthy to come over later in the year and maybe have a role to play here. In terms of the next one, I suppose that the problem is that there just hasn't been another Taysom Hill, has there? Like, he's just, can you think of anybody else who's done what he's done?
That's the thing. I don't think there is the other Taysom Hill. So I want to do this. I got to get some super chats, and people are dying for us to do a quick mock. Can we do a quick mock after this?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So quick super chats here. Hawks0 says, do you guys think John Schneider is the GM of the Seahawks in the 2028 season? I believe his contract ends after 2027. What's your take there, Rob?
My take is that yes, he will be. I totally understand the criticism of John Schneider and agree with a lot of what people say. And I do think that it's kind of a time for him now to prove that he can put together a functioning offensive line as a priority. And it's time within this year or next year to show an investment in the quarterback position to say, okay, for the future, we are looking to develop somebody who isn't Sam Howell or Drew Lock. So I think that's sort of the two big things that he's got to address. But I do think off the back of a 10-win season, I think they'll be able to build on that. I think their schedule looks okay for next year. And provided they don't suffer any big injuries, I'd expect them to improve on potentially 10 wins next year, even if it's just to get to 11. And if you are winning 11 games as a football team, you are probably not going to fire the GM. So I think that he and Mike McDonald will continue. I am optimistic about the future, but ask me again in a month and I might have a very different opinion based on what happens in free agency.
Yeah. Rick R says, actually, Rick R gives 20 Hawk Blogger memberships. Really, really appreciate the generosity, Rick. Thanks for doing that. Albert Butler says, Moe's barbecue is like Dick's in Seattle, something you have to do, but the go-to spot in Pensacola is better. Come out and see the Exos athletes and take a beach day. Great seeing you at the Senior Bowl. Well, it was great seeing you too as well, Albert. I definitely hit Moe's. That was good. KDX Law says, love the Canucks hat.
Yeah.
We need to sign Drew Dahlman. So I think you got a convert there. Eric Kinnaman's been a member for 10 months. He says, if the Seahawks don't sign Ernest Jones, who would you target in the draft at linebacker?
That's a good question. I'm just looking at the board. It's a position where I think early on you've got some very interesting players. Carson Schlesinger, I know we talked about him last time. Campbell. But then, you look later on, I think if you were sort of looking at day 3, someone like Cody Lindenberg's very interesting. He's got some great athletic traits that I think can be developed. I think he's a high upside player. I do like Shamar James more than some others. I think there's something there in that Florida linebacker. Jeffrey Basser is the kind of leader that they like. And he's not the biggest, which is kind of similar to Ernest Jones. And then there's Demetrius Knight. And I find it impossible to dislike Demetrius. I think everybody who's a football fan who likes football in its purest form, which is running, hitting, and being great people, will love Demetrius Knight. Everything about him is amazing as a human being. So it'd be great to see him playing for Seattle.
Yeah, I would add one more name to that list. Not really an Ernest Jones type of player, but Jack Kaiser. I was really impressed with his coverage skills. He
was good at the Senior Bowl.
So I thought he had a pretty good week at Senior Bowl. All right. Eric again says, thanks for the great coverage. Max effort, Brian. Shout out to Rob on the great draft analysis. Yeah, if you guys don't go to Seahawks Draft Blog, you should check out their YouTube channel as well. 67 Plush, who's been a member for 10 months, says, Darius Alexander, Gray Zabel, Tez Johnson, who are some other Senior Bowl stars on Seattle's radar for you two? Probably not a clear position of need. Any other Senior Bowl guys that we haven't brought up? I mean, a lot of folks, Jeff and I did a mock yesterday, and we had Tez Johnson. People did not like that. And I'm like, yeah, we keep doing Elijah Arroyo. We're going to take a different route. Tez Johnson to me is a guy that has a pretty high ceiling as the kind of impact he has. He just has a really low floor. And so I wouldn't hate it if the Seahawks added him, but he's not the top of my list of go get him.
So the other Senior Bowl guys that I really liked, I thought Oladejo, the UCLA edge rusher, had a really good. Oh my God, the guy just looks like a Terminator, and then he plays with his hair on fire. I know people who've been around him, and they were very, very impressed. So I think he's somebody. Azariah Thomas, the cornerback from Florida State, I really like him. Kyle Williams at Washington State, receiver, I think has got a lot about him. Keandre Jackson, who strangely wasn't invited to the combine, the safety from Illinois State, I thought had a really, really good Senior Bowl. Josh Farmer. The thing I liked about Josh Farmer was for the first 2 days, it was just ball rush, ball rush, ball rush, ball rush. And it's like someone had a word in his ear and said, Josh, on day 3, can you do something a bit different? And then he just started winning with speed instead. And then they interviewed him and they said, I'm going to blow the combine up. So get ready. People don't know what I'm going to do. And then I went on Bruce Feldman's freak list and he was there. I didn't even realize he was on the list. So Joshua Farmer is somebody who's probably going to do better than I think a lot of people expect. And then David Walker, the shorter guy, squatty, short, small arms, but KJ Wright running after him after that one rep. It was just he had a really good Senior Bowl as well.
He did. A couple other guys I'll throw in that list. I really liked Miles Frazier. I don't think he's a great fit for the Seahawks and
small
blocking.
hands.
Yeah, but he is a hell of a pass protector. I was really impressed. He had one of the best weeks in that regard. Carson Vincent is a guy that's much later, small school, Alabama A&M, but massive individual. He played him at left tackle the whole week. I think he's got a chance of being a meaningful guard. He was just so passionate every single day. I loved what I saw there. And then the last guy I'd put out there is Marcus Bowe, who I think we've talked about a little bit more. He moves in a way that's really unique for an offensive lineman of his size. And, he's certainly, I think, a very good fit for his own blocking scheme. So that'd be another name I'd put on the list. All right, last one, and then we'll do a quick mock. This comes from Noah Berman. He says, Rob, Brian, which QB would you be most excited about the Seahawks drafting to develop? I think Will Howard in round 3 would be really interesting.
Well, Will Howard, I've been doing a bit of work on him. All these playoff games, by the way, unbelievable. And that's the thing. It's like, how much do you want to place into player at the most important 4 games of his career, plays as well as anybody's played all year? His QBR, Brian, in those 4 playoff games was 96.4. It was nearly perfect for 4 games when it mattered the most. And that means something. His quarterback rating against the blitz last season was 139.8. He had 15 touchdowns, 1 interception against the blitz. These are the kind of numbers that you kind of really look for. And people go, but he only won at Ohio State because he had the great supporting cast. People forget he won the Big 12 with Kansas State in 2022. So he had success with them as well. So there are things to like about him. But then if you look into some of the other stats here, I'm trying to find some of the ones that aren't too great for him. So like his big time throws aren't very good for someone who had Jeremiah Smith, at receiver and Ibuka and the rush and the running backs there taking attention away. You would expect that to be better. He's very good in play action. So his passer rating on play action was 140.8. Which was really, really good for the year. It's sort of like the big plays that he didn't really have. He had one. He had 20 big time throws on throws beyond 20 yards, which is middle of the pack for this class. So there are certain things that you'd expect to be better. I think Will Howard will be good. I think I don't know. I think probably most people will disagree with this, Brian. So I'm guessing you do as well. I do actually think this is a draft class with a middle class. And it is worth taking a chance on somebody, possibly even in round 3. And whether that's Howard, whether that's Ewers, whether that's Leonard, whether that's Dart, whether that's Shook.
Yeah.
I think it's worth taking a chance. If you're prepared to trade for Sam Howell and acquire Drew Lock, I think there are quarterbacks in this draft who have got more upside than both of those players.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. My issue is with the folks who are like, you got to take one in the first 2 rounds. I'm not sure see a guy that I'm willing to pound the table for. I went to Mobile hoping that would be Jalen Milroe. And he wasn't just bad. He was like
really bad.
Really bad. As like it's gonna take a lot for that to work out. He has absolutely elite feet. Like his weapon as a running quarterback is going to be very valuable. I just don't know if he's ever going to even be as good as Justin Fields. Like and Justin Fields has a long way to go as a passer. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I left there feeling like if you want a guy that's mobile as a quarterback, as a project that has a better chance of developing, I would go with Riley Leonard. Like, I don't think he's going to be nearly the runner that Jalen Milroe ever is, but he's a guy that's got that in his toolbox. So
can I give you some numbers for this? This is the thing, on Leonard. So Leonard had 25 runs that were 10 or more yards last season. Milroe had 30. So it's kind of in the same ballpark. And none of the other quarterbacks were anywhere near those two. He had 551 yards after contact. That Leonard. Milroe had 433. He had 120 more yards after contact than big, explosive Jalen Milroe. Leonard, he forced 42 missed tackles. Milroe had 32. And it was 17 rushing touchdowns for Leonard and 20 for Milroe. So they're kind of in the same ballpark. Like Jackson Dart had 3. So that there's a runner in there. Like as a that's what I think about Leonard is his passing is unrefined and needs work.
Yes.
As a runner, he's a potential difference maker.
But I saw Riley Leonard make passes in the Senior Bowl that in the practices that were like, okay, that was on time, that was on target, fine. Like it was hard to find anything positive about the way Jalen Milroe is throwing the ball other than his deep passes. And the thing I'll say, and the reason I'm not like, pounding the table for Riley Leonard is Riley Leonard is just a different athlete than Jalen Milroe. The chances that his running effectiveness is going to translate to the NFL the way Jalen Milroe's will, I think is a lot less. I just don't think he's that kind of athlete, but I think he's got enough to where, knowing that that's a big part of NFL offenses, can he be a Jalen Hurts kind of runner? Yeah, I actually think that's like a more comparable kind of runner. Jalen Milroe is like a home run threat. I think Riley Leonard is a little bit more like a Jalen Hurts in that regard. So I compare those two more than I compare Jalen Milroe and Riley Leonard.
I think Leonard is quite unique in the way that he's more of like a long striding athlete. But there was just one play where people can see in the playoff game against Georgia where he accelerated and started to run away from some of those Georgia defenders. And I thought, hang on a minute, this is pretty special. Like, this is something that's his accent. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he runs an unbelievable, like a 4.50, 4.45 or something like that because he accelerated.
He could certainly help himself a lot if he has a big combine, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, we got to do this quick because I got to head to the airport in a little while. I told Rob we were going to be here for half an hour, and here we are going long. All right, this is gonna be your draft, Rob. I'm going to give you probably not as much time as normal to give you a bunch of different names. Not going to do any trades,
sure.
But you tell me. I'm going to show you who's available. You tell me who you want to take. All right? Can you see this?
Yeah, I can see it.
And tell me if you want to look. There's Tyler Booker.
Okay, look, I mean,
there's Jada Barron. This is kind of like
I'm going to do it. I'm going to ignore because obviously that Tyler Warren's going to go in the top 10. Like I'm going to assume that Tyler Booker's gone. I'm going to do what I was talking about earlier. I'm going to take JD Barron to sort of highlight the kind of mock that I'm thinking about, where you take offensive lineman a bit later on,
for
the purpose of the exercise.
I love it. Okay, here we are at pick 50.
Yeah,
Gray Zabel's sitting there. Azariah Thomas is there.
He won't be there. Let's have a look at defensive linemen because I want to tap into that.
Defensive line. TJ Sanders. Okay. Omar Norman-Lott, Jordan Birch, Jordan Phillips, Neas Peoples.
Have we got any edge? Have we got any edge options here that are a bit better than these? Okay. I'm going to take Braden Swinson. Yeah, we'll take Braden Swinson here. So this is going to be a draft that's going to trigger.
Interesting. Goes with defense on the first two picks, Rob.
Yeah.
I love this. This is a. Oh, all right. Now here we are in the third round.
Okay.
You got TJ Sanders somehow still available. Elijah Arroyo. You've got your quarterback, Quinn Ewers. You got Darian Porter.
I'm going to take the quarterback just to trigger people even more. So I'm going to take Quinn Ewers there. And think John loves Quinn Ewers. And in this projection here, so he's got him in round 3.
I will throw up in my mouth a little bit if that happens. He's a quarterback I just have zero interest in.
So we've got to take some offensive linemen here. By the way, in this mock, they actually signed some offensive linemen.
Okay. Good additional information. Right, you want me to look at offensive line here?
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, this is IOL.
Okay, Luke Kendra and Connor Colby are both still there. Perfect.
Yeah. Jackson Slater, who they've met with twice.
Yeah, Jackson Slater, good player. Is Clay Webb there? Yeah, I'm going to take Clay Webb here.
Clay Webb in round 4.
A good old D+ grade there.
Yeah. I would ignore the grades. All right, so now we're into round 5. Any particular positions you want me to look at?
Interior O-line again.
Interior O-line. Do you want me to look at tackles as well in case there's any converts?
Jake Majors is still there. I'm going to assume that Jake Majors is gone at this point. Yeah, let's go to D-line and let's see what's left of that group.
CJ West.
Could we get a tight end as well? Tight end. There's no
tight ends. Yeah. There's Jalen Conyers.
Yeah. Is the Georgia Tech tight end still there? I don't think he is he?
No, doesn't look like it.
That's a shame. Good blocker. Okay, let's take another offensive lineman and let's go with Connor Colby. I'm not going to.
Connor Colby from Iowa.
Yep.
You see him as a center or a guard?
I think he could play either. I think Clay Webb could play either. But I'd quite happily. I'm going to say that they sign a center, one of the top 2, and then Clay Webb compete and start immediately at left guard. Connor Colby as competition at right guard.
All right. Second, well, actually, the first 6th-round pick of the two.
And this is best player available, is it?
Yes, this is all players.
So can we get a wide receiver? See what's left there.
Wide receiver.
I like Brooks. Kyle Williams is there, but he's not going to be there at this point.
What do you think about Isaac Tesla? He had
I've not studied him. I've not studied him.
Yeah, he had some really impressive. Arian Smith is also a name from a speed perspective. That's an interesting one. A sprinter.
If we go back
the
to
second highest deceleration grade or showing it.
Ja'Cory Brooks had some drops on tape, but there was also some good moments as well. So I'm going to take Ja'Cory Brooks here because I think
Ja'Cory Brooks at receiver from Louisville. And here we are with your second 6th-round pick.
Cornerback. See what corners are left.
Corner.
We've not taken a corner yet, have we? Kone's still there, but he won't be there. No, there's nobody there. I'm not going to take Kone because he'll be way gone by this point.
What about Baron Sorrell?
Is he still there?
He is.
Do you know, actually go down? I'm going to take, get down a bit further.
Kaimon Rucker, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to take Kaimon Rucker because he's massively productive. Like he had an injury in the end of last season, so it's kind of knocked him off everybody's radar. But his production is insane at North Carolina.
Yeah. I like RJ Oben as well. He had a nice Senior Bowl week.
Yeah, really good. Really good.
Logan Brown's an interesting tackle.
Logan Brown's a really interesting one there. Do you know what? Take him as a swing tackle. We'll have him at the end.
I like it. And that's it. So Jahdae Barron in your first pick at 18, Braden Swinson, edge, Quinn Ewers, quarterback, Clay Webb, and Connor Colby, interior guys, Ja'Cory Brooks at receiver, then Kaimon Rucker at edge, and finishing up with Logan Brown. How do you feel about that?
No, I feel really good. I know some of the grades stink, but a lot of these guys are players that I really like in the ranges that they're slotted in. And, you know, if you put this on Twitter, I think I get absolutely hammered. But I actually think that there's some sense to that. Like you can, in terms of the value and how I think the league will end up grading some of these players, I think that'd be okay. So I appreciate the comment that says 0 for 9. But I actually think if you added those players to this team, I think it'd be good. I don't think maybe complaining in 12 months when we've got the next Cooper DeJean in Seattle. So
I think a lot of folks grade mocks on how much they know the players and how much they like the players as opposed to how good the players are. So, I always respect when somebody comes out with a mock that is totally different than what groupthink is out there. And this qualifies. So, Rob, thank you again for coming on. Anything that people should look forward to coming up from you on Seahawks Draft Blog?
Yes. So if people are wondering why I'm getting all these crappy bits of stats and data from, it's because I'm in the middle of writing a big article, which will just sort of put everything down there for you. And I'm going to sort of pin it in the blog. So if you want to kind of look at who's best under pressure and you can find all that information there. So I'm in the middle of that, and that should be coming out tomorrow, Monday.
Awesome. All right. That was Rob Staton. Make sure you follow him, and we will have more Rob and others coming up. Tomorrow will be Joel Corey, the agent, will be on with me. We're going to talk a little bit about projections for Geno Smith's contract, DK Metcalf's contract, and some other contract stuff coming up for the Seahawks. So make sure you tune in then. Until then, have a great rest of your Sunday. I'm Brian Emhauser. This has been episode 328 straight days of Seahawks coverage. Take care, everybody.